There's something to be said about a game that can exceed your expectations. Trailers might look iffy, or the complete vision of the developers just isn't translated well in preview material. It's something you just have to experience on your own despite questions of whether it's worth your time or not. But those are the moments when a game can truly surprise you, pull you in despite issues or shortcomings, because what it does so well. That is the essence of Pokémon Legends Arceus. It isn't perfect, and Pokémon still has a long way to go, but man is it addictive for what it is. Last year I talked about Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl and how I was simply bored by the whole endeavor. While there were upgrades to systems that made it great for newcomers, it lacked any kind of twist or new feature like past remakes to draw in returning fans. But Legends feels completely unique, not only in its story and mechanics, but in its setting too. It's a prequel, setting the stage for what will eventually become the Sinnoh region and placing players in the middle of those great legends. It's a wild, untamed world, which is something that Pokémon has never expanded upon. This focuses on the transition from when people feared Pokémon to when they became a part of everyday life. And it all begins with you being plopped in the Hisui region before it became known as Sinnoh and its society took shape. A great dimensional rift has appeared above Mount Coronet and is the source of not only your arrival in this era, but a disturbance amongst the Pokémon. You're quickly recruited into an expedition group known as the Galaxy Team, who have come to Hisui in the hopes of making it their home. But now you must not only calm the noble Pokémon who have gone berserk, but discover the origins of what caused it. That's the story in the most basic terms, and it's perfectly serviceable on its own. But it's the details that make it feel special. You are constantly told how dangerous Pokémon are and how you could wind up dead if not careful. It's a stark contrast to the exuberant love everyone has for Pokémon in past games, and it finally acknowledges that these creatures are kinda super dangerous. But having your character be completely comfortable around Pokémon is a brilliant choice. Of course you are. Even if you've never played a Pokémon game before, you have to be aware of just how beloved they are. As players, we are teaching everyone how to befriend Pokémon, and seeing the base that is Jubilife Village expand and change with each side mission finished is a great bit of environmental storytelling. However, the actual story left me feeling a little bored most of the time. The majority of it involves two opposing clans native to Hisui, the Diamond and Pearl clans. They each have their own view of the deity of the region, leading them to butt heads more often than not, though the Galaxy Team has encouraged them to reach a tenuous peace. This could be interesting on its own, but it never goes anywhere beyond annoying bickering and an excuse to introduce more characters. Legends follows a strict formula for most of the game. Go to an area where a noble Pokémon has begun to rage, tame a special rideable Pokémon needed to reach that noble, complete a task to impress their guardian, have a boss fight with the noble to calm them, and repeat. If you stick to the main story, you will be bored throughout most of the adventure because so little changes. But thankfully it does pick up toward the end with some genuine surprises and stakes, along with a truly challenging final battle in the postgame. It's just a shame that a lot of that variety was missing for most of the early game. That said, it's not that big of a deal because if you do rush through Pokémon Legends, you're kinda missing the point. It's a game where the best moments are the little ones. The excitement of arriving in a new area and seeing new Pokémon running around, of finding a truly rare one and the tension of capturing it and not spooking it. Even returning to old areas with new rideable Pokémon that open up new possibilities and show even more Pokémon to be caught is incredible in its own right. And that's the strongest point in Legends' favor: discovery. They might not be the biggest locations, but they are packed with things to find, whether it's items for crafting or Pokémon. It's the most fun I had filling out my Pokedex in a long time. And a lot of that has to do with how filling the Pokedex has changed. No longer is a single catch good enough to earn an entry. Instead, each Pokemon has a series of goals. This could be catching a certain amount, defeating a certain amount, using specific moves against and with them, as well as side quests tailored toward them. Not all of them have all those elements, but it adds flavor to that Pokemon. And not every goal needs to be fulfilled to complete the Pokedex entry, just the equivalent of 10 tasks. It should feel like busy work, but there's something oddly addicting just because the act of catching and battling is so fun. Catching Pokemon is both simpler and more engaging than ever before. Instead of having to solely rely on battling and not knocking them out, it's possible for the player to just toss a Pokeball at them and potentially catch them right then and there. That method will work on many early Pokemon, but it's eventually not enough. Catching them unaware is the key, and using the tall grass or items that distract them or hide you can be a great help. If they don't know you're around, they're much more likely to be caught once the ball strikes them, doubly so if you strike them in the back. Adding even more to the strategy are the new Heavy and Feather Balls. Heavy balls are more effective at catching a Pokemon unawares, but due to their weight, they can't be thrown far, necessitating you get extremely close and risking them being spooked. Feather balls are much lighter and can be thought of almost a sniper option, able to catch Pokemon from much further away. I honestly found them to be my preferred ball, but the standard Pokeball, Great Ball, and Ultra Ball were just as handy. Especially because if you do mess up and alert the Pokemon, they can still be caught through traditional means. Fight them, whittle down their health, and attempt to catch. Of course, if they run away, then you're out of luck. But even the battles feel different. It's like every hit was harder, and I found many of my Pokemon getting one-shotted by others of a similar level much more often. There's a level of difficulty in Legends that hasn't been seen in Pokemon for quite some time. And it works. If characters are saying that I could die in the wild, then I want to feel that threat. Sure enough, certain Pokemon are heartless, so willing to chase, harass, and outright deck you just for getting too close. It's easy to get overwhelmed, making running the only option at times. Fighting isn't always the best idea because 3-on-1 fights can happen, and they can feel devastating if you're not prepared. The beauty of Legends is just how many options you have in battle, many of which have been tweaked to better fit the single-player focus of the game. The biggest change, and one I desperately want in every Pokemon game from now on, is the ability to freely choose what 4 moves your Pokemon can use. The pool of what they've learned is always there, it's just a matter of changing it to fit your style. Not only that, but more moves can be learned from a tutor for a small fee. The ease of all this is phenomenal and allowed me to test out strategies I wouldn't have risked before. The other big change is the flow of battle. While normally it's still turn-based, there are elements that can shift how a Pokemon goes. The most common are the Agile and Strong style moves. Agile moves sacrifice power but increase the likelihood of your Pokemon going twice, while strong moves do the opposite. More power but slowing you down and allowing the opponent to move twice. Reading the situation and choosing what is best played out more times than I would have thought, as the cost of using a strong move to finish one Pokemon still plays out for the next, where they immediately get 2 moves, likely finishing yours off. This shift in turns also occurs for the more powerful moves that would have taken time to recharge in normal Pokemon gameplay. It leads to more consideration, especially in later Pokemon battles. While most of the changes to battle feel like they were done for the better, there was one that became extremely irritating as time went on. Experience points are only awarded at the end of a battle. Your Pokemon may have defeated an opponent's, but that doesn't matter if they don't survive until the end. It left me frustrated as I tried to level my weaker Pokemon by sending them into battle so they could get bonus XP, only to be defeated. This meant my stronger Pokemon had to step in and end up even stronger. So I had to use my strong Pokemon to level my weak Pokemon, but then my weak Pokemon were getting the battle bonuses. I understand that they didn't want experience interrupting the flow of battle, but as it was, it felt like my options were being limited. It's only a minor issue in the end, as battling overall felt snappier and more powerful. Each move felt like a big hit, and you can freely move during them. Get in the way though, and you will take damage. It ties into the idea of how dangerous Pokemon can be, and nowhere is that more apparent than the Berserk Noble Pokemon. Each are essentially boss fights where their attacks must be dodged while throwing calming pouches at them. Dodge an especially big attack, and you can send out your team to weaken them even quicker. While the early battles are pretty simple, the later fights can get downright exhilarating, as I had to find openings to actually throw my pouches. If I couldn't figure out the right pace of the fight, I would often die and have to restart. But that's what made them more engrossing than a typical gym battle. I was engaged. I had to be. What brings all these elements together is Jubilife Village and the Galaxy team itself. As you catch Pokemon and fulfill tasks for the Pokedex, you'll be awarded money and points. The points mark your progress as a member of the Galaxy Team Survey Corps, allowing you to increase your star rank and be able to control more powerful Pokemon while unlocking the recipes for stronger Pokeballs. Not only that, but Jubilife Village is teeming with people ready to offer up side quests that could also unlock or expand services within the town, or lead you to brand new Pokemon. The village also has shops that sell new outfits, new haircuts, new recipes for crafting, and the items themselves. It's a hub that feels more personal as each of these tasks are completed and the main story progresses. You see how the people change their feelings toward Pokemon and you as an outsider with each thing you accomplish. There's something naturally satisfying about that. But all this also expands just how much there is to do in Legends. It feels like there's always a distraction somewhere as I catch wind of a new item or Pokemon to track down, or a minigame to take part in. On their own, none are too remarkable, but within the context of the game and the feeling it gives, they're downright addictive. Taken as a whole, it feels like Pokémon Legends could be judged against other games of this type rather than previous entries in the series. It's so close to reaching that point, but there are elements that hold it back. For one, while the game has a beautiful art style, it can look downright ugly at times. The environment can become jagged and unappealing, or, most distractingly, the frame rate of distant Pokemon can become cartoonishly low. Seeing a handful of frames representing flapping wings always took me out of the moment. The soundtrack is also pretty threadbare. While it's great when it shows up and certain battle themes are downright fantastic, most of the time the game is just environmental noises. It can work, but I did find myself missing the more consistent music, especially when the only non-battle song I can remember is Jubilife Village's, and that is maddeningly repetitive after a while. What it all comes down to is that Game Freak couldn't quite match its ambition, but the fact that it is showing ambition is commendable. Seeing the developer take a risk like Legends is reassuring, and while it might not nail everything, it's the beginning of something good. Because make no mistake, Pokémon Legends is good. It's unpolished, but the basics are there. It's fun, addictive, and an element of Pokemon that fans have wanted to see for years, leaving me with great vibes overall. I never imagined they'd take the concept of the wild area this far when first encountering it in Sword and Shield. Whether this idea can or even should be brought to a more modern Gen 9 is up to debate, but there are clear ways for this idea to be expanded and refined. It's exciting, almost more so because this feels like one of the first times the Pokemon fandom has come together in love of a game in a very long time. But does that apply to you? How did you feel about your time with Pokémon Legends Arceus? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you like this review, consider checking out our Patreon over at patreon.com/gvgaming. Of course, we appreciate all your support, whether it's just hitting the like button, subscribing to Good Vibes Gaming, or ringing the bell. Until next time. Bye.